Hello there, and welcome to Earth's History, where we examine landscapes that hide as much as they reveal, where we explore regions whose current desolation might mask ancient vitality, where we ask whether the world's largest hot desert, the Sahara, stretching across North Africa like an ocean of sand and stone, might be concealing beneath its dunes and beneath its parched surfaces the archaeological treasures of civilizations so ancient that they predate everything we call recorded history, civilizations that thrived when the Sahara was not desert but paradise, when rivers flowed where now only dust blows, when forests grew where now only rock and sand extend to every horizon, when lakes, the size of seas, reflected skies now seen only through shimmering heat, and when people, perhaps millions of people, built cities and monuments and cultures that the advancing desert eventually swallowed whole, leaving us to wonder what lies beneath the sand. If you've ever looked at satellite images of the Sahara and noticed geometric patterns beneath the surface, if you've wondered why ancient rock art in the middle of the desert depicts hippopotami and crocodiles and abundant wildlife, if you've heard stories of lost cities and wondered whether any truth underlies the legends, if you've considered that the world's harshest desert might once have been among the world's most fertile regions, and that the transformation from paradise to wasteland might have happened within human memory, preserving itself in myths of gardens lost and lands cursed, you're beginning to touch on one of archaeology's greatest remaining mysteries. What civilizations existed in the Sahara before it became desert? How advanced were they? What happened to them? And what evidence of their existence still waits beneath millions of square kilometers of sand? Wherever you are right now, I hope you're comfortable, settled, ready to journey across the Sahara not as it exists today, hostile, empty, forbidding, but as it existed thousands of years ago when it was the green Sahara, a vast grassland and savanna dotted with lakes and rivers, supporting megafauna from elephants to lions to giraffes, and quite possibly supporting human civilizations that we've only begun to discover. Civilizations that might have been among the first on Earth to develop agriculture, complex society, monumental architecture, and all the hallmarks of what we call civilization. Civilizations that the desert eventually claimed, burying their achievements under sand dunes hundreds of feet deep, leaving only tantalizing hints, rock art, mysterious structures visible from satellites, ancient lake beds, and legends, to suggest that beneath the emptiness lies a history more complex and more ancient than we've imagined. If this exploration into the Sahara's hidden past changes how you see deserts, not as eternal wastelands, but as recently transformed landscapes that might conceal entire civilizations, if it makes you wonder what other secrets lie buried in harsh environments we've dismissed as archaeologically uninteresting, if it inspires you to support efforts to map and excavate the Sahara before climate change and development destroy evidence we haven't yet discovered, I'd be grateful if you'd like the video, subscribe to the channel, or share it with someone else who understands that Earth's greatest archaeological discoveries might still be waiting in the least expected places, hidden not in jungles or underwater, but beneath the world's largest desert, protected by the very harshness that makes investigation so difficult. So settle in. Let your breathing slow like the patient accumulation of sand grains over millennia, each tiny increment building dunes that eventually swallow cities whole. Let your mind wander across endless horizons of sand and stone, imagining green valleys and flowing rivers where now only desolation reigns. Let yourself contemplate the profound impermanence of landscapes, how quickly, on geological timescales, paradise becomes desert and desert might become paradise again, and how the earth beneath our feet contains layers of history we're only beginning to read, stories written in stone and sand and scattered artifacts, waiting for patient archaeologists to decipher them. And let's begin our investigation into whether the Sahara, hostile, empty, forbidding Sahara, might be hiding the secrets of Earth's first civilizations, and what discovering those secrets would mean for understanding human history, the origins of complex society, and the fragility of civilizations built in environments that seem stable, but can transform within human lifetimes into something entirely different. The Green Sahara, when desert was paradise. To understand what might be hidden beneath the Sahara, we must first understand that the Sahara hasn't always been desert. The region has oscillated between wet and dry periods multiple times over hundreds of thousands of years, driven by cyclical changes in Earth's orbit and axial tilt. The African humid period, The most recent Green Sahara phase, called the African Humid Period, AHP, lasted from approximately 11,000 to 5,000 years ago, coinciding roughly with humanity's transition from hunter-gatherer societies to agricultural civilizations elsewhere in the world. The transformation, around 11,000 years ago as the last ice age ended, shifts in Earth's orbital parameters changed the distribution of solar radiation, strengthening African monsoons. Summer solar radiation in the northern hemisphere increased, heating the North African landmass more intensely, which strengthened monsoon circulation from the Atlantic Ocean. The result: rainfall increased dramatically across what is now the Sahara Desert. What the Green Sahara looked like based on geological evidence, paleoclimatic reconstructions, archaeological findings, and ancient rock art, scientists have pieced together a picture of the Sahara during the African Humid Period. Vast lakes. The Sahara contained enormous lakes, some larger than modern countries. Lake Megachad, for instance, was larger than the Caspian Sea at its peak, around 350,000 or 400,000 square kilometres, compared to the modern remnant Lake Chad at just 1,500 square kilometres. Other major lake systems included lakes throughout the Fezzan region of Libya, lakes in the Tenere region of Niger, Lake Ptolemy in Sudan, numerous smaller lakes throughout the region, rivers and wetlands. River systems crisscrossed the Sahara, feeding the lakes and creating extensive wetlands. Some of these ancient river channels are still visible in satellite imagery beneath the sand. Vegetation zones. Rather than sand dunes, the Sahara contained Mediterranean-type vegetation in the North Savannah, grasslands in the central regions, tropical vegetation in the south, gallery forests along rivers and lakes, woodland mosaics, wildlife. The region supported megafauna populations similar to modern East African savannas: elephants, lions, giraffes, hippopotamus, crocodiles, antelopes and gazelles, wild cattle, aurochs, rhinos, various predators. Climate. Instead of extreme heat and aridity, the region experienced regular seasonal rainfall, monsoons, moderate temperatures, humidity supporting vegetation, seasonal variations but overall habitability. Human populations. This hospitable environment attracted and supported substantial human populations. Archaeological evidence shows widespread settlement across regions now uninhabitable, fishing communities along lakes, pastoral societies, herding cattle, early agricultural experiments, substantial population densities in favourable locations, the catastrophic desiccation. Around 5,500 to 5,000 years ago, the Green Sahara began dying. The transformation from fertile grassland to barren desert happened relatively rapidly, within several human generations in some regions, though the overall process took centuries. What caused the change? The same orbital shifts that created the Green Sahara eventually reversed it. Precession of the equinoxes, Earth's axial tilt, obliquity, and the wobble in its axis, precession, operate on cycles of roughly 21,000–26,000 years. These changes affect the seasonal distribution of solar radiation. By 50,500 years ago, orbital parameters shifted enough that northern hemisphere summer solar radiation decreased, weakening the African monsoons. Rainfall declined, vegetation died back, and a devastating feedback loop began. The feedback loop: reduced rainfall, vegetation dies, less vegetation, less moisture from plant transpiration, less local rainfall, less vegetation, increased surface albedo, reflectivity, less solar heat, absorption, weaker monsoons, exposed soil, dust storms, more atmospheric dust, blocked sunlight, cooler temperatures, even less rainfall. Desertification accelerates in self-reinforcing cycle. Within centuries, the transformation was dramatic. Lakes dried up or shrank to remnants. Rivers stopped flowing. Vegetation disappeared. Wildlife populations crashed or migrated. And human populations faced catastrophic environmental collapse, the human impact. Imagine living in the Green Sahara around 5,500 years ago. Your ancestors have occupied this region for thousands of years. Lakes and rivers provide abundant water. Grasslands support herds of cattle that your people have domesticated. Fish fill the waters. Wildlife provides hunting opportunities. The climate is generally favourable. Your society has developed sophisticated adaptations to this environment. Then, gradually, things begin changing. The rainy seasons become shorter, less reliable, water levels in lakes drop year by year, vegetation becomes sparser, wildlife populations decline, droughts become more frequent and severe, conflicts increase as populations compete for shrinking resources. Over generations, the landscape transforms. What was green becomes brown. What was wetland becomes dry earth. What was lake becomes salt flat. What was river becomes dry wadi, ephemeral stream bed. Your people face choices, migrate, leave ancestral lands, seeking wetter regions to the south, Sahel, sub-Saharan Africa, or north, Mediterranean coast, Nile Valley. Adapt, change subsistence strategies, concentrate around remaining water sources, develop technologies for surviving in increasingly arid conditions, perish. Some populations, unable to migrate or adapt quickly enough, simply died out. Archaeological evidence of the crisis. The desiccation of the Sahara left clear evidence. Mass migration signals. Around 5,000 to 4,000 years ago, we see sudden population increases in the Nile Valley, potentially contributing to emergence of Egyptian civilization, the Sahel region south of Sahara, the Mediterranean coast of North Africa. These population influxes likely included Saharan refugees fleeing desertification, settlement abandonment. Archaeological sites throughout the Sahara show sudden abandonment around 500 and 5,000 years ago. Settlements occupied for centuries or millennia, simply left behind as populations evacuated. Cultural changes. Societies that remained in marginal Saharan regions, oases, mountains, seasonal water sources, show dramatic cultural shifts around this time, from fishing and agriculture to pastoralism and nomadism, adapting to the new desert reality. Rock art chronology. The latest rock art from the Sahara, before the region became too arid for permanent habitation, dates to around 5,000 to 4,000 years ago, showing people and animals adapted to increasingly dry conditions. Cattle replace. Hippopotami. Depictions of water become rare. Human figures appear more desperate. The key question: if substantial human populations occupied the Green Sahara for 6,000 plus years, 11,000 to 5,000 years ago, and if some of these populations potentially developed complex societies, what happened to their monuments, cities, and cultural achievements? The hypothesis: they're still there, buried beneath the sand. The advancing desert didn't destroy structures, it buried them. Sand dunes hundreds of feet deep now cover regions that once supported cities. Erosion has effaced some features, but in the hyper-arid conditions of the modern Sahara, preservation can be exceptional. No moisture, no vegetation to break up structures, no freeze-thaw cycles. Items buried in sand can survive for thousands of years in pristine condition. If civilizations existed in the Green Sahara, their remains should still be there, waiting to be found. The evidence: rock art archives. The most visible evidence of the Green Sahara's inhabitants is the rock art they left behind. Thousands of sites across the Sahara containing tens of thousands of individual images, providing a visual archive of life before the desert. The scale of Saharan rock art. The Sahara contains one of the world's largest concentrations of prehistoric rock art. Thousands of known sites, tens of thousands of individual images, geographic distribution across entire Sahara, Libya, Algeria, Niger, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, Morocco, Egypt, Sudan, time depth spanning 12,000 plus years. Techniques: petroglyphs, images carved or pecked into rock surfaces, pictographs, images painted on rock surfaces using natural pigments. Major rock art regions: Tassili Naja, Algeria, designated UNESCO World Heritage Site, contains over 15,000 engravings and paintings spanning 10,000 years. The art shows progression from wildlife-rich savanna to increasingly arid conditions. Akarkas Mountains, Libya, thousands of rock art sites showing detailed scenes of daily life, hunting and ritual activities. Air Mountains, Niger, extensive rock art including the famous swimming humans petroglyph showing figures in swimming positions, in a region that hasn't had surface water for 5,000 plus years. Enedi Plateau, Chad, remote rock art sites showing extraordinary detail and artistic sophistication. Gilf Kebir, Egypt, famous cave of swimmers and cave of beasts, with vivid paintings of humans and animals. Tibesti Mountains, Chad, high-altitude rock art in one of Sahara's most remote regions. What the rock art shows: The art provides a chronological sequence showing environmental change. Earliest period, 12,000, 7,000 years ago. Large wild animals, giraffes, elephants, rhinos, hippos, crocodiles. Hunting scenes with bows and spears, human figures in naturalistic style. Abundant water implied by animal species depicted pastoral period, 7,000, 5,000 years ago. Domesticated cattle dominating imagery. Herders with cattle herds. Elaborate cattle decorations and rituals reduced wild animal depictions. Human figures showing cultural complexity. Jewelry, clothing, hairstyles. Late period, 5,000, 3,000 years ago. Horses and chariots, introduced from Mediterranean. Camels, introduced later, around 2,000 years ago. Increasingly arid adapted species, fewer people and animals. Simpler, more schematic style. Evidence of complex society. Some rock art suggests social complexity beyond simple hunter-gatherer or pastoral societies. Ritual and religious imagery. Elaborate scenes showing what appear to be religious ceremonies. Masked figures, possibly representing deities or spirits. Symbolic and abstract designs suggesting sophisticated cosmology. Social hierarchy. Variation in figure sizes potentially indicating social status. Elaborately decorated individuals suggesting leadership or priestly roles. Organized group activities suggesting coordinated social structure. Technological sophistication. Detailed depictions of complex objects. Elaborate weapons, sophisticated tools, decorated pottery. Architectural elements in some images. Evidence of trade. Objects from distant regions depicted. Cultural continuity. Repeated motifs across wide geographic areas suggesting shared cultural traditions. Artistic styles persisting over millennia, suggesting stable cultural transmission. Site reuse over thousands of years, suggesting sacred or significant locations. The roundhead paintings. Among the most mysterious Saharan rock art are the roundhead style paintings, found primarily in Tassili Naja, dated to roughly 10,000 to 8,000 years ago. The earliest period of Saharan rock art. Characteristics. Human figures with round or oval heads lacking facial features, often floating or in unusual positions, sometimes enormous in scale, several meters high. Abstract and symbolic rather than naturalistic, associated with apparent ritual or religious contexts. Interpretations, mainstream, shamanic or religious art representing spirits, ancestors, or transformed humans in altered states of consciousness. The lack of facial features and unusual proportions suggests these represent non-ordinary beings or experiences. Alternative. Some researchers have noted the figure's resemblance to modern depictions of aliens or astronauts. Large heads, smooth features, sometimes appearing to wear helmets or suits. While mainstream archaeology dismisses this as pareidolia, seeing patterns where none exist, the imagery remains genuinely strange. Reset ancient civilization consideration. Could the roundhead figures represent memories of even earlier, more advanced humans, perhaps survivors or members of a pre-Green Sahara civilization? The ancient artists might have depicted these figures based on oral traditions or artifacts from an earlier period, resulting in strange non-human appearance because the artists were working from descriptions rather than direct observation. This is highly speculative, but the roundhead paintings remain anomalous and not fully explained. The swimming humans of Wadi Sura in the Cave of Swimmers, Gilf Kabir, Egypt. Paintings show human figures in positions strongly resembling swimming strokes. The cave is in one of the driest parts of the Sahara. It hasn't had surface water for thousands of years. Dating. Approximately 8,000 to 10,000 years old, placing them in the Green Sahara period when the region had lakes and rivers. Significance. These images provide direct visual evidence that this now hyper-arid region once had enough water for people to develop swimming as a common activity, implying substantial permanent water bodies. Cultural sophistication. The artistic quality and anatomical accuracy of the swimming figures suggests sophisticated observation and artistic tradition. The cattle culture. The most common subject in Saharan rock art from 7,000 to 5,000 years ago is cattle. Thousands of images show elaborately decorated cattle, herders, and pastoral activities. Implications. Domestication. Cattle domestication in North Africa might have occurred independently from Middle Eastern domestication, or cattle might have been introduced from the Levant. Dating and genetic studies are ongoing. Economic importance. The prominence of cattle in art suggests they were central to Saharan culture, not just food sources but wealth indicators, ritual objects and cultural symbols. Social complexity, the elaborate decoration of cattle, horns, patterns, ornaments depicted in art, and the organisation required for herding large numbers suggests sophisticated social organisation. Climate indicator, the presence of cattle across the Sahara during this period confirms widespread grasslands capable of supporting large herds. Environmental conditions drastically different from today. The sudden end. Around 5,000 years ago, new rock art production in most of the Sahara essentially stops. The few late images, post 5,000 years ago, are found only in marginal regions that retained some water, oases, mountains, northern-southern edges. Interpretation: the cessation of rock art correlates with desertification and population evacuation. People didn't stop making art. They left the region, taking their artistic traditions to new homes in the Nile Valley, Sahel and Mediterranean coast. What the rock art tells us, the Saharan Rock Art Archive proves, substantial human populations occupied the Sahara for thousands of years during the Green Sahara period. These populations had sophisticated culture, art, and likely social organisation. The environment was radically different, supporting megafauna and human populations across vast areas now completely uninhabitable. The transition to desert occurred within human memory. Early art shows paradise, late art shows increasing aridity, then art stops. What the rock art hints at but doesn't prove: how large were Saharan populations at their peak? How complex was their social organisation? Did they build permanent structures, villages, towns, cities? Did they develop technologies beyond those of typical Neolithic peoples? What happened to them when the desert advanced? To answer these questions, we need more than rock art. We need to find their settlements, their artifacts, their burials, their monuments, if they exist. And increasingly, evidence suggests they do exist, buried beneath the sand. Satellite archaeology, seeing beneath the sand. Modern technology is revealing features beneath the Sahara's surface that ground-based archaeology can't easily detect. How satellite archaeology works: satellites use various sensing methods to detect subsurface features. Synthetic aperture radar, SAR. Radar signals penetrate sand and soil to varying depths, typically up to 5 meters in hyper-arid conditions, revealing buried structures, ancient river channels, and disturbed soil. Multispectral and hyperspectral imaging. Different wavelengths of light reveal different surface and near-surface features. Vegetation stress over buried walls, moisture patterns indicating subsurface structures, mineral signatures from ancient construction materials. LiDAR, when available from aircraft. Laser pulses create high-resolution topographic maps, revealing subtle elevation changes from buried structures. Thermal imaging. Temperature differences between buried stone, brick and surrounding sand reveal architectural features. Major satellite discoveries in the Sahara. Ancient river systems. Satellites have revealed extensive networks of ancient rivers and streams, crisscrossing the Sahara, now completely dry but visible as subtle channels beneath the sand. The most dramatic example, the Tamanrasset River system, which once flowed from the Atlas Mountains across the Sahara to the Atlantic Ocean. A river comparable in scale to the modern Nile, now completely vanished except for satellite traces. Other major ancient river systems include rivers feeding Lake Megachad from the north, the Kufra River system in Libya, various Nile tributaries that now end in the desert drainage systems throughout the central Sahara significance. These rivers would have supported riparian civilizations, settlements along their banks, agriculture in their floodplains, trade routes along their courses. Where are the cities that should have existed along these ancient rivers? Buried structures. Satellite imagery has revealed thousands of potential archaeological sites in the Sahara. Geometric patterns, wall foundations, settlement mounds, now buried beneath sand. Examples: Garamantian civilization, Libya. Satellite mapping has revealed the extent of the Garamantian civilization, roughly 500 BCE, 500 CE, a complex society in the Fezzan region of Libya that built elaborate underground irrigation systems, fogaras, fortress towns, and extensive agricultural systems. The Garamantes are historically documented, mentioned by Herodotus and other classical writers, but satellite archaeology has revealed their civilization was far more extensive than previously known. Hundreds of settlements, thousands of kilometers of underground irrigation channels, massive agricultural systems in regions now completely barren. Key point: the Garamantes existed during the historical period within past 2,500 years, yet their civilization was essentially unknown until satellite archaeology revealed its scale. If a 2,000-year-old civilization can be hidden beneath the Sahara's sand, what about civilizations from 7,000 or 10,000 years ago? Pre-Garamantian sites. Beneath and around Garamantian sites, satellites have detected earlier occupation layers, settlements predating the Garamantes, extending back into the Green Sahara period. The Tichit tradition, Mauritania. Satellites have revealed hundreds of stone-built settlements in Mauritania dating to 2,000–3,000 years ago, representing one of Africa's earliest complex societies, possibly an independent development of urbanism and social complexity. Again, if a 2,000–3,000-year-old civilization of hundreds of settlements can remain essentially unknown until satellite mapping, what else is waiting to be found? Megalithic structures. Satellites have detected potential megalithic structures, stone circles, standing stones, cairns, scattered across the Sahara, particularly in the Nabta Playa region, Egypt, the Tenere region, Niger, the Tagant Plateau, Mauritania. Various locations in Algeria and Libya. Nabta Playa is particularly intriguing. Located in southern Egypt, Nabta Playa was a seasonal lake during the Green Sahara period. Archaeological excavations, prompted by satellite and aerial photography observations, have revealed stone circles, arrangements of standing stones dated to approximately 7,000–6,500 years ago. Among the world's oldest known megalithic structures, predating Stonehenge by over 1,000 years. Calendar circle. One stone arrangement appears to be aligned with solstices and possibly specific stars, suggesting astronomical knowledge and intentional positioning. Buried cattle. Complex burial sites containing complete cattle, suggesting ritual importance and sophisticated cultural practices. Settlements. Evidence of seasonal settlements supporting possibly hundreds of people during favourable periods. Social organisation. The size and sophistication of the stone structures suggests organised labour and social hierarchy. These weren't simple hunter-gatherer camps. Significance. Nabta Playa demonstrates that Saharan populations during the Green Sahara period achieved significant social complexity and potentially developed astronomical knowledge, all before Egyptian civilization is supposed to have begun. And Nabta Playa was discovered largely by accident. Remote sensing detected anomalies. Ground investigation confirmed significance. How many similar sites remain undiscovered? Linear features and roads. Satellites have revealed linear features crossing the Sahara, ancient trackways, possible road systems, or other linear constructions now buried or partially eroded. Some of these features extend for dozens or hundreds of kilometers, suggesting organized long-distance travel or trade systems. Debate. Are these natural features, ancient stream channels, geological formations, animal migration paths, human-created trade routes, or something more substantial, actual constructed roads? Most haven't been ground-truthed, investigated in person, due to remoteness, political instability, or lack of funding. The Richat structure, Eye of the Sahara. In Mauritania, the Richat structure, a massive circular formation 40 kilometers in diameter, is visible from space as a bullseye pattern. Mainstream explanation. Geological formation, either eroded dome or ancient impact crater, with concentric rings formed by differential erosion of rock layers of varying hardness. Alternative speculation. Some researchers have proposed Richat structure as the location of Atlantis, noting its circular pattern matches Plato's description. However, geological evidence strongly supports natural formation, and the structure's age, hundreds of millions of years, makes human construction impossible. Relevance. The Richat structure demonstrates that massive geometric features can exist in the Sahara that are purely natural. This complicates satellite archaeology. Not every geometric pattern is artificial. Distinguishing natural from artificial features requires ground investigation. The challenge: satellites can reveal potential sites, but can't definitively identify them without ground truthing. The Sahara contains 9 million square kilometers of area, vast regions inaccessible due to remoteness or political instability, ongoing conflicts in Libya, Mali, Niger, Chad. Extreme environmental conditions making fieldwork difficult and expensive. Thousands of potential sites detected by satellites but not yet investigated. Current status. Satellite archaeology has revealed the Sahara's archaeological potential. Thousands of potential sites await investigation. Many likely represent settlements, structures, or monuments from the Green Sahara period. But we won't know what they are until someone goes there, excavates, and analyses the evidence. The lost lakes, megalithic complexes beneath the waters. The Green Sahara's lakes were vast, some comparable to modern Great Lakes or even larger. When these lakes dried up, they left behind basins, salt, flats, and sediment, containing whatever was in or near the water when it dried. Lake Megachad. At its peak around 6,000 years ago, Lake Megachad covered approximately 400,000 square kilometers, larger than the Caspian Sea, about 250 times larger than the current remnant, Lake Chad at 4,500 square kilometers and shrinking. Coastline implications. A lake of this size would have had thousands of kilometers of coastline. Lakeside settlements, fishing villages, ports, and trade centers would likely have developed along these shores, just as they have along every major lake in human history. When the lake dried, these settlements would have been abandoned, buried beneath sediment as the lake shrank and now lie beneath. The current small remnant of Lake Chad, the salt flats and dry basins surrounding it, sand dunes that have covered former lake bed archaeological potential. The dried lake beds should contain settlement sites from the lake's shores at various water levels. As the lake shrank over centuries, settlements would have been established at progressively lower elevations. Fishing camps and ports, burial sites, submerged structures, if any, were built in shallow water, artifacts dropped or discarded in the lake. Investigation challenges. Current Lake Chad is shallow, swampy, and difficult to access. The region is politically unstable, Boko Haram activity, border disputes. Dry lake beds are partially covered by sand dunes. Excavation in former lake beds requires specialized techniques. Limited archaeology has been conducted around Lake Chad, but what has been found includes Neolithic settlements along ancient shorelines, evidence of fishing economies, pottery and stone tools, burials. But systematic survey is lacking. We don't know the full extent of habitation around Lake Megachad, and we haven't investigated the deeper, older parts of the lake bed. Other Saharan paleolakes, Fezzan paleolakes, Libya, a series of large lakes in what is now the Fezzan Desert of Libya. Sediment cores and satellite imagery show these lakes existed during the Green Sahara period. Archaeological surveys have found Neolithic sites around these ancient lake shores, but comprehensive investigation is prevented by Libya's political situation, ongoing civil conflict since 2011. Tenere Paleolakes, Niger, multiple large lakes in the Tenere Desert region. The name Tenere means desert of deserts in the Tuareg language. It's one of the most desolate parts of the Sahara, yet during the Green Sahara period, it held substantial lakes supporting hippos, crocodiles, and human populations. Archaeological findings include the Gobiro site, a burial ground containing nearly 200 skeletons dated to two occupation periods, roughly 10,000 years ago and 6,000 years ago, representing some of the best preserved ancient Saharan human remains. The burials show care and ritual suggesting cultural complexity. Western Desert Paleolakes, Egypt. Multiple lakes in Egypt's Western Desert, part of Sahara, some very large. Satellite and geophysical surveys have detected buried ancient shorelines and deposits. Limited archaeology has found Neolithic settlements, but systematic investigation of the lake beds hasn't occurred. Underwater archaeology in a desert. When we think underwater archaeology, we imagine divers exploring shipwrecks in oceans. But dried lake beds are a form of underwater archaeology, excavating sites that were once underwater. Special preservation, items that ended up at lake bottoms may be exceptionally preserved. Organic materials can be preserved in anaerobic, oxygen-free mud, silt and sediment protect artifacts from erosion and UV damage. In some cases, mineralization or salt incrustation creates protective coatings. What might be found? Fishing equipment, hooks, nets, boats, offerings or ritual deposits in the lake. Many cultures make water offerings. Submerged structures, platforms, fish traps, docks, preserved organic materials, wood, textiles, food remains that normally wouldn't survive in Saharan conditions. The hypothesis: If any Saharan civilizations during the Green Sahara period developed to the level of monument building, some of those monuments might have been built along lake shores, or even partially in the water, as lake-dwelling or lakeside structures. When the lakes dried up, these structures would have been buried beneath sediment. They're still there, waiting to be found, but finding them requires ground-penetrating radar surveys of dried lake beds, systematic excavation in challenging conditions. Lake sediments are often clay-rich and difficult to excavate, funding and logistical support for expeditions to remote, harsh environments. Political stability allowing access. Very little of this work has been done. The paleo lakes of the Sahara remain largely unexplored. The Neolithic cultures, how advanced were they? Archaeological work that has been conducted in the Sahara has revealed substantial Neolithic, New Stone Age populations during the Green Sahara period. But Neolithic is a broad term. It includes societies ranging from simple farming villages to complex proto-urban centres. How complex were Saharan Neolithic societies, and could some have developed beyond typical Neolithic levels? The Khartoum Mesolithic Neolithic Sudan. The Khartoum region, where the White Nile and Blue Nile converge, shows early development of pottery around 8,000–9,000 years ago, among the world's earliest pottery. Khartoum pottery predates pottery in the Middle East, where agriculture first developed, by several thousand years, suggesting independent innovation. Implications: Saharan Sudanese populations were technologically innovative. The region was economically productive enough to support specialist, potters' complex enough society for craft specialization. Later Khartoum Neolithic cultures, around 6,000–5,000 years ago, show permanent settlements, agriculture, sorghum millet, cattle herding, sophisticated pottery with elaborate decoration, long-distance trade, shells from Red Sea, stones from distant sources. This suggests social complexity approaching or reaching the level of early civilizations, organized trade, economic surplus supporting specialists, symbolic artistic sophistication, the Tichet tradition, Mauritania. Between approximately 2,500–1,500 years ago, well after the Green Sahara ended but before the region became completely uninhabitable, the Tagant Plateau in Mauritania supported a complex society called the Tichet tradition. Characteristics: hundreds of stone-built settlements, over 500 identified, defensive walls and fortifications, agricultural terraces and irrigation systems, social stratification, different house sizes, elite burials, trade connections, copper, salt, beads from distant sources, elaborate burial practices, possible proto-urban centres. Significance: the Tichet tradition represents indigenous African development of social complexity and urbanism, not influenced by Egyptian, Mediterranean or Middle Eastern civilizations. Debate. Some researchers argue Tichet represents an independent development of civilization, though lacking writing, monumental architecture or other typical civilization markers. Others consider it a complex chiefdom or proto-state. The key point: if the Tichet tradition, existing during the increasingly arid late period, achieved this level of complexity, what might earlier Green Sahara societies have achieved when environmental conditions were more favourable? The Nabta Playa culture, Egypt. We've mentioned Nabta Playa's megalithic structures. The culture that built them, roughly 7,500 years ago, shows astronomical knowledge. Stone alignments suggest solstice observations and possibly stellar alignments, requiring multi-generational observational tradition and mathematical geometric knowledge. Social organization, moving and erecting standing stones, some weighing several tons, requires organized labor, dozens of people working together under direction. Ritual complexity. Cattle burials and stone arrangements suggest elaborate religious or ritual practices. Economic surplus. Building non-subsistent structures, stone circles that don't house anyone or store anything, requires economic surplus. The society produced enough food to support people doing non-productive labor. Population. Estimating population is difficult, but the scale of construction suggests at least hundreds of people during peak seasonal occupation, possibly more. Connection to Egypt. Nabta Playa's decline around 4,500 and 5,000 years ago, due to desertification, coincides roughly with the emergence of complex society in the Nile Valley. Some researchers propose that Nabta Playa refugees migrated to the Nile, bringing their astronomical knowledge, religious traditions and social organizational skills, potentially contributing to or catalyzing the emergence of Egyptian civilization. This is controversial, but it highlights that sophisticated Saharan cultures existed before Egyptian civilization, and environmental change forced them to migrate, potentially transmitting their knowledge to the regions they moved to. The question of urbanism. Did any Green Sahara societies develop actual cities? Large, permanent, densely populated settlements with monumental architecture, craft specialization, and social stratification? Standard view. No. Saharan Neolithic cultures remained primarily pastoral or agricultural villages. Urban civilization first developed in Mesopotamia, Sumerian cities like Uruk, Ur, around 5,500 years ago, and Egypt slightly later, not in the Sahara. Reasons given. No clear evidence of Saharan cities has been found. Pastoral nomadism, dominant in late Green Sahara period, doesn't typically lead to urbanism. Environmental conditions were changing rapidly toward aridity, not favouring stable urban development. Alternative possibility. What if Saharan cities existed but haven't been found because, 1. They're deeply buried. The most favourable locations for cities, valley floors, lake shores, river confluences, are exactly where sand accumulation would be greatest. Cities in these locations would be under dozens or hundreds of feet of sand. 2. They're not where we're looking. Most Saharan archaeology focuses on areas accessible from modern settlements or along modern routes. Vast areas remain unexplored. Ancient cities might be in regions now so remote and hostile that no one has searched there. 3. They were built of impermanent materials. If Saharan cities were built primarily of mud brick, timber and other organic materials, like many ancient cities, they would erode much faster than stone-built cities. After 5,000 to 7,000 years of erosion and sandblasting, they might be nearly unrecognizable except as subtle mounds detectable only by careful survey. 4. They collapsed during desertification. The rapid environmental change might have caused social collapse before societies reached full urban complexity. We might be looking for fully developed cities when what exists is proto-urban centres that never quite reached classic city status before environmental catastrophe struck. The key point: the absence of found Saharan cities doesn't prove they didn't exist. It might just mean we haven't found them yet. Ancient Saharan agriculture. The origins debate. One of the most important questions in human history is, where and when did agriculture first develop? The traditional answer, the Fertile Crescent, modern Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Iran, around 10,000, 12,000 years ago, with independent developments in China, Mesoamerica and a few other regions. The evidence from Sahara suggests this story might be incomplete. Agriculture might have been independently invented in the Sahara during the Green Sahara period, possibly as early as anywhere in the world. African domesticates. Several important crops were domesticated in Africa and are native to the Saharan Sahelian region. Sorghum, domesticated in northeastern Africa, possibly Sudan, Ethiopia region, around 5,000, 7,000 years ago, possibly earlier. Pearl millet, domesticated in the Sahel region around 4,500 years ago, possibly earlier. African rice, Oryza glaberrima, domesticated in West Africa, Niger River region, independently from Asian rice, around 3,000 years ago, though wild rice use might be much older. Watermelon, likely domesticated in northeastern Africa around 5,000 years ago. Various legumes, gourds and other crops, domesticated in Sahara-Near-Sahelian Africa. The timing question: most of these domestications are dated to 3,000, 5,000 years ago based on archaeological evidence. However, problem 1. Preservation bias. Plant remains preserved poorly in many Saharan environments. The absence of evidence from earlier periods might just mean earlier remains haven't preserved or haven't been found. Problem 2. Search bias. Intensive archaeological work focused on agricultural origins has occurred in the Middle East, Mesoamerica and China, but much less in the Sahara due to access difficulties and political instability. Problem 3. Dating challenges. Dating early agriculture is difficult, requires finding seeds or other diagnostic plant parts associated with datable material. This is rare in any environment, and especially rare in the Sahara where preservation is sporadic. The controversial hypothesis. Some researchers propose that African agriculture is much older than currently dated, possibly 8,000, 10,000 years ago or even earlier, making it contemporary with or potentially predating Middle Eastern agriculture. Evidence cited: early grinding stones. Ground stone tools used for processing grain have been found in Saharan sites dated to 10,000 plus years ago. These could represent processing of wild grains or early domesticated grains. Pollen evidence: some lake sediment cores show changes in pollen composition around 8,000, 10,000 years ago that might indicate cultivation, increased proportions of grasses and other food plants. Inference from circumstance: the Green Sahara environment was favourable for agriculture. Reliable rainfall, grasslands, access to wild ancestor species of African crops. If agriculture was going to be invented independently, the Green Sahara would be a likely location. Genetic evidence: some studies of African crop genetics suggest domestication might be older than archaeological dating indicates, though this is debated. Mainstream skepticism: most archaeologists remain unconvinced that Saharan agriculture is as old as Middle Eastern agriculture, noting absence of clear evidence, no sites with definitive evidence of 10,000-year-old agriculture. Domesticated seed caches, agricultural fields, storage facilities clearly associated with farming have been found. Genetic dating: most genetic studies of African domesticates suggest domestication around 5,000 years ago, not 10,000. Alternative explanations: early grinding stones might have been used for processing wild plants rather than domesticated crops. Pollen changes might reflect natural vegetation changes rather than agriculture. The question remains open. Did agriculture develop independently in the Green Sahara, possibly very early? Or was African agriculture a later development, possibly influenced by Middle Eastern agricultural knowledge spreading south? Why it matters. If Saharan agriculture is very old, 8,000, 10,000 years ago, it suggests 1. Multiple origins. Agriculture was invented independently multiple times, suggesting it's a relatively easy innovation that arises naturally when conditions are right. 2. Lost knowledge. If Saharan populations developed agriculture 8,000 to thus 10,000 years ago, they had 3,000, 5,000 years to develop agricultural societies before desertification forced abandonment. That's enough time for sophisticated agricultural civilizations to arise. 3. Knowledge transfer. Saharan refugees fleeing desertification around 5,000 years ago would have carried agricultural knowledge to the regions they moved to, Nile Valley, Sahel, Sub-Saharan Africa, potentially jump-starting agricultural development in those regions. The evidence we need: to resolve the question of Saharan agricultural origins, we need more extensive archaeological survey in Green Sahara regions, better preservation and dating of plant remains, genetic studies of African crop wild ancestors and domesticates, systematic excavation of promising sites. This work is slowly progressing, but the Sahara's vastness and inaccessibility mean decades of work remain. The Sahara-Egypt connection. Did Saharan refugees build the pyramids? One of the most intriguing questions in Saharan archaeology is, did environmental refugees from the desiccating Sahara contribute to, or even catalyze the emergence of ancient Egyptian civilization? The timeline coincidence, Saharan desiccation, began around 5,500 years ago, accelerating around 5,000 years ago. Egyptian civilization emergence. The pre-dynastic period, complex societies forming in Nile Valley, began around 6,500 years ago. The Old Kingdom, pyramid building era, began around 4,700 years ago. Pre-dynastic population increase. Archaeological evidence shows rapid population increase in the Nile Valley during the pre-dynastic period, particularly 5,000 years ago. The hypothesis: as the Sahara dried, populations migrated from Saharan regions, particularly the Western Desert and areas that are now Libya and Sudan, into the Nile Valley, bringing population numbers, labour force, agricultural knowledge, astronomical knowledge, solstice observations, stellar alignments, religious ritual practices, cattle worship, stone monuments, social organisational models. The influx of Saharan populations and knowledge contributed to the rapid development of Egyptian civilization, providing the cultural and demographic foundation for the explosive growth of pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egypt. Evidence supporting the hypothesis: 1. Cultural continuities. Cattle worship. Saharan rock art shows elaborate cattle rituals and decoration. Egyptian culture prominently features cattle symbolism: Hathor, Apis bull, cattle as wealth indicators, cattle sacrifice, suggesting cultural connection. Astronomical alignments. Nabta Playa's megalithic stone circle shows astronomical alignments similar to later Egyptian temple alignments. Saharan populations might have brought astronomical knowledge to Egypt. Megalithic construction. Nabta Playa demonstrates that Saharan populations were building stone monuments before Egyptian pyramid construction. The labour organisation and technical knowledge required for megalithic construction might have transferred from Sahara to Egypt. Religious symbolism. Some Egyptian religious symbols, particularly related to sky, stars and desert, show possible connections to Saharan traditions. 2. Linguistic evidence. Some linguistic studies suggest ancient Egyptian language contains substrate influences from languages spoken west of the Nile in what's now the Sahara, suggesting population mixture. 3. Genetic evidence. Genetic studies of ancient Egyptian populations show connections to populations from regions west and south of Egypt, consistent with migration from the Sahara and Sahel. Modern North African populations show genetic continuity with ancient populations, suggesting the demographic shifts during Green Sahara desiccation created lasting genetic signatures. 4. Archaeological distributions. Many pre-dynastic Egyptian sites are located in the Western Nile Delta and Western Nile Valley, exactly where populations fleeing the desiccating Western Desert would arrive. Counterarguments. 1. Egyptian civilization was indigenous. Most Egyptologists argue that Egyptian civilization developed primarily from indigenous Nile Valley populations, with minimal external influence. The cultural developments are explicable through internal processes, without requiring Saharan input. 2. Limited archaeological evidence. While some cultural similarities exist between Saharan Neolithic cultures and pre-dynastic Egypt, clear archaeological evidence of mass migration or cultural transfer is limited. 3. Alternative explanations. Population increase in the Nile Valley during pre-dynastic period might reflect internal demographic growth rather than immigration, or might reflect immigration from other directions, Levant, Nubia. 4. Timing issues. Some cultural features allegedly borrowed from Sahara, cattle worship, astronomical knowledge, appear in Egypt at times when Sahara was still somewhat habitable, before the final desiccation, complicating the refugee narrative. The likely reality. Egyptian civilization probably represents a mixture, primarily indigenous Nile Valley development, influenced by Saharan populations migrating east as conditions deteriorated, also influenced by interactions with Levantine, Nubian, and other neighbouring populations. The question isn't did Saharan refugees build Egyptian civilization, but rather how much did Saharan cultural and demographic input contribute to Egyptian development? The answer likely varies by region and period. Western Delta and Nile Valley regions probably received substantial Saharan input. Other regions less so. Some cultural features, astronomical knowledge, megalithic traditions, might show strong Saharan influence. Other features, writing, state formation, specific religious practices, might be more indigenous. Why this matters? If Saharan populations contributed significantly to Egyptian civilization, it means 1. Saharan cultures were sophisticated. They possessed knowledge and organizational skills worth transmitting and adopting. 2. Environmental refugees can be civilization builders. The narrative of refugees as problems is countered by examples where refugees brought skills and knowledge that built or strengthened civilizations. 3. The Sahara's history is central, not peripheral. Rather than being a marginal region where simple pastoralists lived, the Sahara during the Green Sahara period was a significant cultural centre whose population dispersal shaped surrounding civilizations. The unanswered question, if Saharan populations brought sophisticated knowledge and organizational skills to Egypt, where did they develop that knowledge? The implication, advanced, organized Saharan societies existed during the Green Sahara period, sophisticated enough that their descendants could contribute to building one of history's greatest civilizations. Where are those Saharan societies' remains, buried beneath the sand? The Atlantis question. Could the Sahara be Atlantis? No exploration of hidden Saharan civilizations would be complete without addressing the Atlantis question. Could the legendary lost civilization of Atlantis have been located in the Sahara? Plato's Atlantis account. The Greek philosopher Plato described Atlantis in two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, 360 BCE, allegedly based on information preserved by Egyptian priests and passed down from the Athenian statesman Solon. Plato's description, island nation located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, Strait of Gibraltar, existed 9,000 years before Plato's time, 90 and 600 to BCE, or around 11,600 years ago. Advanced civilization with sophisticated technology and architecture, concentric ring structure of alternating land and water, powerful navy that attempted to conquer the Mediterranean destroyed in a single day and night, by earthquakes and floods, sank into the sea and disappeared. Standard interpretation: Atlantis is fictional, a literary device Plato invented to illustrate philosophical points about ideal and corrupt societies. Any resemblance to real places is coincidental. Alternative interpretations: Atlantis was real, but Plato's account is distorted. Various locations have been proposed. Mediterranean locations: Santorini, Thera, Crete. Atlantic locations: Azores, Canary Islands, Mid-Atlantic. Various other locations worldwide: the Sahara Atlantis hypothesis. Some researchers have proposed that Atlantis was located in what is now the Sahara Desert, noting 1. Timeline match. Plato's date of 9600 BCE, 11,600 years ago, corresponds to the beginning of the Green Sahara period, exactly when the region was transforming from desert to fertile grassland. 2. Geography. During the Green Sahara period, the region contained enormous lakes. A civilization built around or near one of these lakes might have been described as an island surrounded by water. 3. Destruction. The desiccation of the Sahara around 5,000 years ago involved catastrophic environmental change, lakes drying up, lands becoming uninhabitable, populations forced to flee. This could be the basis for Atlantis's destruction in a day and night. 4. Egyptian connection. Plato claims his information came from Egyptian priests. If Atlantis was a Saharan civilization, Egyptians would have been most likely to preserve its memory, as Saharan refugees likely migrated to Egypt. 5. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules. This phrase has been interpreted to mean west of Gibraltar, Atlantic Ocean, but it might have been a metaphorical or confused description of far to the west. The Sahara is west of Egypt. Specific Sahara Atlantis location proposals: the Richas structure, Mauritania. The massive circular formation in Mauritania has been proposed as Atlantis due to circular, concentric ring structure matching Plato's description, appropriate size, 40 kilometers diameter, ancient lake, river evidence in the region, remote location now in desert, explaining why it disappeared. Problems with Richat Atlantis. Richas structure is geological, hundreds of millions of years old. No archaeological evidence of advanced civilization doesn't match Plato's description of an island in the sea. Dating is completely wrong. Richat formed millions of years ago, not 11,600 years ago. Lake Tritonis, Tunisia, Libya. Ancient sources describe a large lake in northwestern Sahara called Lake Tritonis that dried up in ancient times. Some researchers propose this lake hosted Atlantis. Problems. Lake Tritonis, if it existed, was likely much smaller than Plato's Atlantis. No clear archaeological evidence of advanced civilization location doesn't match beyond Pillars of Hercules, Lake Megachad. The huge Saharan lake in the center of the continent has been proposed as Atlantis's location. Problems: far from Mediterranean, difficult to explain naval conflict with Athens described by Plato, no evidence of advanced civilization has been found. Doesn't match island beyond Pillars of Hercules, assessment of Sahara Atlantis. Hypothesis: strengths, timeline matches. Green Sahara period. Environmental catastrophe, desiccation, provides mechanism for destruction. Egyptian preservation of the story makes sense if it was a Saharan civilization. The region's civilization supporting environment and subsequent transformation fits the narrative arc weaknesses. Plato's geographic descriptions don't match Sahara. He clearly describes an island in the ocean. No archaeological evidence of a civilization matching Atlantis's described sophistication has been found in Sahara. Plato's story contains many elements that seem clearly fictional: huge empire conquering Mediterranean, precise circular engineering, specific measurements, simpler explanation. Plato invented the story, and any coincidental similarities to real places are just that. Coincidence. The most likely reality. Atlantis as described by Plato probably didn't exist as a single real place. However, Plato's story might incorporate distorted memories of real catastrophes, Bronze Age collapse, Theera eruption, other disasters, cultural memories of pre-Greek civilizations, Minoans, Mycenaeans, others, possibly very distorted memories of Green Sahara civilizations, mostly fictional elements serving Plato's philosophical purposes. If the Sahara contributed anything to the Atlantis story, it would be distant cultural memory of the Green Sahara's desiccation, a story of fertile lands becoming uninhabitable desert, preserved in Egyptian Mediterranean oral traditions, eventually reaching Plato in highly distorted form. But this doesn't mean a real Atlantis existed in the Sahara. It just means environmental catastrophe in the Sahara might have contributed to myths about lost civilizations. The danger of Atlantis speculation. Focusing on Atlantis can distract from actual Saharan archaeology. The Sahara's buried civilizations, whether or not they have anything to do with Atlantis, are worth studying on their own merits. Real Saharan cultures, pastoral societies, early agriculturalists, megalithic builders, sophisticated Neolithic peoples, existed and left evidence. These real cultures deserve attention and research funding. Atlantis speculation, while entertaining, often diverts attention and resources toward fruitless searches for a probably fictional place rather than serious archaeology of real cultures. What lies beneath? The case for systematic survey. The evidence is mounting that the Sahara conceals substantial archaeological heritage from the Green Sahara period. What's needed is a systematic effort to find, map, and excavate these buried sites. Current limitations. 1. Funding. Saharan archaeology receives minimal funding compared to other regions. Middle Eastern, Mediterranean, and American archaeology attract most research funding. Why? Donors and institutions prefer funding work in regions with known spectacular finds, politically stable areas, accessible locations where logistics are manageable, areas with existing infrastructure and support. The Sahara fails on most counts. It's remote, politically unstable in many areas, logistically challenging, and, because survey has been limited, lacks a track record of spectacular finds to attract attention. 2. Access. Large portions of the Sahara are inaccessible or dangerous. Ongoing conflicts in Libya, Mali, Niger, Chad, terrorist activity in Sahel regions. Extreme environmental conditions, lack of infrastructure, permit requirements, and bureaucratic obstacles. 3. Scale. The Sahara is enormous. 9 million square kilometers. Comprehensive survey would require decades and hundreds of millions of dollars. 4. Expertise. Saharan archaeology requires specialized knowledge and skills. Understanding Saharan paleo environments, remote sensing and geophysical survey techniques, desert survival and logistics, cultural sensitivity and local knowledge, multilingual abilities, Arabic, French, Berber languages. Relatively few archaeologists specialize in the Sahara, limiting research capacity. What a systematic survey would entail. Phase 1. Remote sensing survey. 5 to 10 years, 50-100 million. Satellite coverage. Comprehensive satellite imaging of entire Sahara using synthetic aperture radar, SAR, to penetrate sand multispectral and hyperspectral imaging, high-resolution optical imagery, thermal imaging, regular monitoring to detect changes, analysis, AI machine learning algorithms to identify potential archaeological features, buried structures, ancient river channels, settlement mounds, paleo lake shorelines, linear features and possible roads, vegetation anomalies indicating subsurface structures, prioritization, rank detected features by archaeological potential. Phase 2. Aerial survey of priority regions, 5-10 years, 20-50 million. LIDAR mapping, high-resolution topographic mapping of areas identified as high priority in Phase 1. Drone surveys, detailed photography and mapping of specific sites, geophysical survey, ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, and electrical resistivity surveys of accessible high-priority sites. Phase 3. Ground truthing, 10-20 years, 100 and 200 million. Site testing, small test excavations at hundreds of sites to verify, satellite or aerial interpretations and assess archaeological significance, dating, radiocarbon, OSL, optically stimulated luminescence, and other dating methods to establish chronology, documentation, photography, mapping and recording of all investigated sites, Phase 4. Major excavations, ongoing 200 and 500 million plus, full excavation, comprehensive excavation of the most significant sites, specialized studies, paleobotanical, zooarchaeological, genetic, isotopic, and other specialized analyses, conservation, preservation and stabilization of discovered structures and artifacts, publication, academic publications and public outreach about findings, total estimated cost, $370 to $850 million over 20-40 years. For comparison, this is comparable to major infrastructure projects or large scientific endeavors, particle accelerators, space missions, etc. Potential discoveries. A comprehensive Saharan survey would likely reveal hundreds of previously unknown settlements from the Green Sahara period, ranging from small camps to substantial villages or towns, monumental structures potentially including more megalithic sites like Nabta Playa burial complexes, possible proto-temples or ceremonial centers, defensive works or fortifications, technology and artifacts showing sophistication of Saharan Neolithic societies, trade networks connecting Sahara with Mediterranean, Nile and sub-Saharan Africa, artistic and cultural achievements, possibly evidence of early metallurgy, writing or other advanced technologies, environmental evidence documenting, precise timing and pace of desertification, human responses to climate change, agricultural practices and domestication, paleo-climate reconstruction, human remains allowing, genetic studies of ancient Saharan populations, understanding of health, diet, and lifespan, population movements and relationships with other groups, insights into civilization origins. Did complex societies develop in the Sahara? What was the relationship between Saharan cultures and later civilizations, Egypt, West Africa, North Africa? How did environmental change affect social development? Unlikely but possible surprises. Could a comprehensive survey find evidence of civilizations more advanced than expected? Possibilities. Proto-urban centers, settlements of thousands of people with monumental architecture, craft specialization, and social stratification, essentially cities. Early writing, symbolic systems or proto-writing predating known writing systems. Advanced technology, metallurgy, engineering or other technologies appearing earlier than expected. Extensive trade networks, evidence of long-distance trade on a scale suggesting sophisticated economic organization. Most archaeologists would consider these findings unlikely but not impossible. The Sahara during the Green Sahara period was environmentally favorable for complex society, development, and we've barely scratched the surface of investigation. Surprises have occurred before. Göbekli Tepe overturned assumptions about pre-agricultural societies. Nabta Playa's megalithic structures were unexpected. The extent of the Garamantian civilization was unknown until satellite survey the Sahara could yield similar or even more dramatic surprises. Indigenous knowledge, the Tuareg and other desert peoples, while the Green Sahara's urban populations, if they existed, are long gone, the desert hasn't been empty. Various peoples have continuously inhabited marginal Saharan regions for thousands of years, particularly the Tuareg, Berber people traditionally inhabiting the central and southern Sahara, known for their distinctive blue indigo-dyed clothing and veils, camel caravans and nomadic pastoralism. The Tebu, Tubu, people of the central Sahara, particularly Tibesti Mountains and Tenere regions, Bedouin Arabs, inhabiting the northern and eastern Sahara. Various other groups, numerous smaller groups inhabiting specific oases, mountains or marginal regions. These peoples possess knowledge of the desert accumulated over centuries or millennia, including oral traditions, stories, legends, and historical accounts passed down through generations, geographic knowledge, locations of water sources, routes through the desert, landmarks, and features invisible to outsiders. Archaeological awareness. Many desert inhabitants know where old sites or ruins are located, but may not report them to authorities due to lack of contact with archaeological institutions, distrust of external authorities, desire to protect sites from looting or disturbance, belief that sites are sacred or dangerous, ancient sites as resources. Some desert inhabitants use ancient sites for practical purposes, stone from ruins for building material, shelter in caves with rock art wells or water sources near old settlements, navigation landmarks. Collaborating with indigenous peoples is essential for effective Saharan archaeology. Benefits of collaboration. 1. Access. Indigenous guides can lead researchers to sites that would take years to find independently. 2. Knowledge. Oral traditions might preserve information about sites' functions, histories, or significance. 3. Interpretation. Indigenous perspectives can offer insights into rock art meanings, site functions, or cultural practices. 4. Logistics. Desert peoples know how to survive and travel in conditions that would quickly kill outsiders. Their expertise makes fieldwork safer and more efficient. 5. Legitimacy. Archaeological work conducted with indigenous participation and consent is ethically sound and less likely to face resistance or be interpreted as exploitation. Challenges. 1. Communication. Language barriers. Many Saharan peoples speak languages unfamiliar to most archaeologists. Cultural differences in worldview and communication styles. 2. Trust. Historical exploitation by colonial and post-colonial authorities creates justified suspicion of external researchers. 3. Divergent interests. Indigenous peoples may prioritize economic survival, cultural preservation, or other goals over archaeological research. Sites might be more valuable as tourist attractions, building material sources, or left untouched for spiritual reasons. 4. Political complications. Some indigenous groups are in conflict with national governments, making collaboration politically sensitive. Best practices. Effective collaboration with indigenous Saharan peoples requires learning local languages or working with trusted translators, spending time building relationships before requesting help with research, sharing research benefits, employment, training, acknowledgement, economic benefits, respecting cultural protocols and site sacredness, obtaining informed consent for any research activities, including indigenous people as collaborators, not just workers or guides. Examples of oral traditions. Stories of the time before the desert. Many Saharan peoples have traditions describing when the region had more water, trees, and animals. These stories might preserve memories of the Green Sahara period. Tales of ancient peoples. Some traditions describe giants, or the old people, who lived in the desert before current inhabitants, possibly distorted memories of earlier populations. Knowledge of hidden cities. Various legends describe lost cities buried in the sand. Most are probably fictional, but some might be based on actual ruins. Sacred sites. Many rock art sites or megalithic structures are considered sacred by local peoples, who might have preserved knowledge of their original functions through oral tradition. Example: the Garamant, rediscovered. The Garamant, ancient Libyan civilization, 500 BCE, 500 CE, were mentioned by classical authors but largely forgotten by modern scholarship, until the 1960s-70s, when systematic survey of Fezzan region, Libya, began revealing their vast civilization. Local Tuareg and other Saharan peoples knew about Garamantian ruins all along. They'd lived among and used them for centuries, but archaeological community was unaware because no one had asked the local inhabitants. This illustrates that indigenous knowledge can shortcut decades of survey work, if researchers bother to listen. Current status. Some modern Saharan archaeological projects collaborate effectively with indigenous communities, others don't. Improving this collaboration would enhance archaeological outcomes while respecting indigenous rights and knowledge. Climate change and the race against time. The Sahara is changing again, but this time in complex ways due to anthropogenic climate change, and these changes threaten undiscovered archaeological sites. Current changes, increased, desertification in Sahel. The southern edge of the Sahel region, is experiencing increased aridity and desertification, partially due to climate change, partially due to overgrazing and deforestation. Shifting sand dunes. Dune systems are moving and expanding, potentially burying some sites more deeply while exposing others. Rare but intense rainfall. Climate change is altering precipitation patterns. While overall aridity continues, Some models predict rare but very intense rainfall events causing flash flooding and rapid erosion, threats to archaeology. 1. Erosion. Exposed sites are eroding faster due to wind and occasional intense rainfall. Rock art, fragile structures, and surface artifacts are being lost. 2. Burial. Mobile sand dunes are burying sites, making them harder to find and excavate. 3. Development. As Saharan nations develop infrastructure, roads, mines, oil, gas extraction, solar farms, settlements, construction threatens sites before they can be documented. 4. Looting. Economic pressures and instability lead to increased looting of sites for artifacts to sell on black markets. 5. Conflict. Ongoing conflicts in Libya, Mali, Niger, Chad destroy sites, prevent research access, and create conditions for looting. The urgency. Archaeological evidence is being lost faster than it's being documented. Every year, sites are eroded beyond recognition, destroyed by development, looted and scattered, buried more deeply, rendered inaccessible by conflict. We have a limited window, perhaps just decades, to document Saharan archaeology before much of it is lost forever. Opportunities from climate change. Paradoxically, climate change also creates opportunities. Exposure. Shifting sands expose previously buried sites. Researchers monitoring satellite imagery have detected new sites revealed as dunes migrate. Accessible regions. Some previously hyper-arid regions may become slightly more accessible as climate patterns shift, though this is offset by increased instability in other regions. Urgency attracts attention. The threat of irretrievable loss might motivate increased funding and international cooperation for Saharan archaeology. What's needed? Rapid survey. Prioritizing rapid documentation of threatened sites over slow, comprehensive excavation. Better to have basic records of many sites than detailed records of a few while others are destroyed. Remote sensing. Maximizing satellite and aerial survey to identify and document sites without requiring ground access to every location. International cooperation. Political instability affects individual nations, but international efforts can maintain continuity. UNESCO, archaeological organizations and NGOs can coordinate work across borders. Training. Building archaeological capacity in North and West African nations so local archaeologists can document sites within their own countries. Public awareness. Making people aware of the Sahara's archaeological heritage so there's public support for preservation and research. Digital preservation. Creating comprehensive digital archives, photogrammetry, 3D modeling, GIS databases. So even if physical sites are destroyed, records survive. The stakes. The Sahara potentially contains evidence of some of humanity's earliest complex societies, independent development of agriculture and social complexity, human responses to dramatic climate change, cultural connections between African regions, possibly unexpected technological or social achievements. Losing this evidence would be an irretrievable loss, not just for Africa, but for humanity's understanding of its own history. The window is closing. We need to act now. The vision, what we might find. Let's engage in informed speculation. If comprehensive survey and excavation of the Sahara were conducted, what might be discovered? Scenario 1, the conservative scenario, most likely. Findings. Hundreds of Neolithic settlements of varying sizes, small camps to villages of hundreds. Extensive evidence of pastoral societies, cattle herding across vast regions. Evidence of early African agriculture, possibly predating current dating. Multiple megalithic sites similar to Nabta Playa. Extensive rock art archives, far more than currently known. Evidence of trade networks connecting Sahara with surrounding regions, sophisticated pottery, tools and artistic traditions. Human remains allowing genetic and health studies implications. Green Sahara supported substantial, culturally sophisticated populations. These populations were ancestors or close relatives of later African civilizations. Environmental change forced migration that influenced Egyptian, Sahelian, and West African cultural development. No evidence of urban civilization or writing, but complex Neolithic societies. This scenario matches mainstream expectations and would still be significant, confirming Saharan culture's sophistication and historical importance. Scenario 2. The moderate surprise scenario, possible. Findings: everything from Scenario 1, plus several proto-urban centres, settlements of thousands with monumental architecture, evidence of social stratification and political complexity, palaces, elite burials, public works, advanced crafts, sophisticated metallurgy, textile production, specialised pottery workshops, extensive irrigation systems and intensive agriculture, possible proto-writing or symbolic systems, evidence of long-distance maritime trade, to Mediterranean, possibly around Africa. Implications: Saharan societies achieved complexity approaching civilization level before environmental collapse. The desiccation destroyed emerging civilizations that might have competed with or rivaled early Egypt and Mesopotamia. African civilization development was more complex and multifaceted than currently understood. Climate change can destroy civilizations at any development stage. This scenario would require revising some assumptions about African prehistory, but wouldn't fundamentally overturn mainstream narratives. Scenario 3, the dramatic discovery scenario, unlikely but not impossible. Findings: everything from Scenarios 1 and 2, plus true urban centres, cities of 10,000 plus people with monumental architecture rivaling early Egyptian or Mesopotamian cities, fully developed writing system predating Sumerian, Egyptian writing, advanced technologies, sophisticated metallurgy, engineering, possibly technologies we don't expect in Neolithic contexts, evidence of maritime civilization, ports, ships, trade with distant regions, astronomical knowledge encoded in monuments with precision matching or exceeding later civilizations, possible evidence of contacts with or influences on Egyptian, Mediterranean, or other distant civilizations. Implications: Earth's first civilizations might have emerged in the Sahara, not Mesopotamia. These civilizations were destroyed by environmental catastrophe, with survivors dispersing and founding influencing later civilizations elsewhere. Human civilization is older, and climate change's civilizational impacts more severe than currently understood. Fundamental revision of world prehistory required. This scenario is what alternative historians hope for, but mainstream archaeologists consider very unlikely. Scenario 4, the world-changing discovery scenario, extremely unlikely. Findings: everything from previous scenarios plus evidence of technological achievements beyond anything expected for the time period, architectural or engineering feats that challenge understanding of ancient capabilities, knowledge systems, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, far more advanced than expected. Possible evidence of very ancient pre-Green Sahara occupation or structures. Implications: possibility of reset civilizations or cycles of civilization. Questions about human history's continuity and whether we've forgotten advanced knowledge from earlier periods. Fundamental reconsideration of human capabilities in prehistoric periods. This is the lost advanced civilization scenario, popular in alternative archaeology but considered extremely unlikely by mainstream scholars. What's realistic? Most likely, Scenario 1, conservative, or Scenario 2, moderate surprise. The Sahara almost certainly contains extensive evidence of sophisticated Neolithic cultures, possibly approaching early civilization in complexity. Possible, but unlikely. Scenario 3, dramatic discovery. Not impossible. Archaeological surprises happen, but would require either extremely favourable preservation of sites not yet investigated, reinterpretation of evidence that's been found but not fully understood, discoveries in regions not yet surveyed, very unlikely. Scenario 4, world-changing discovery, would require either extraordinary evidence that somehow avoided detection despite satellite survey, extremely deep burial of sites beyond current survey methods, evidence in forms we don't expect and don't know how to detect. The only way to know is to look systematically and thoroughly. Living with the mystery, the Sahara waits. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you'll dream of the Sahara not as endless dunes of lifeless sand, but as it was 8,000 years ago. Green valleys where rivers flowed, vast lakes reflecting clouds, grassland supporting herds of elephants and giraffes, and humans, perhaps millions of humans, living in settlements from small camps to substantial towns, fishing in the lakes, herding cattle across the savannas, painting elaborate art on rock walls, building stone monuments aligned with the stars, developing agricultural systems, crafting sophisticated pottery and tools, telling stories around fires at night, raising children who would grow to see the world begin changing, the rains becoming less reliable, the grasslands turning brown, the lakes shrinking year by year. Perhaps you'll dream of the last generations in the Green Sahara, the people who watched paradise die, who saw their world transform from garden to desert within their lifetimes, who made the desperate decision to abandon ancestral lands and flee to the Nile Valley or the Sahel or the Mediterranean coast, carrying with them what they could: children, livestock, seeds, tools, stories, leaving behind houses, monuments, fields, graves, the accumulated achievements of thousands of years of habitation, trusting that the desert would preserve what they left, that someday, somehow, their descendants would return and remember. Perhaps you'll dream of archaeologists walking across the sand using ground-penetrating radar and satellite imagery, carefully excavating beneath dunes, brushing sand from walls that haven't seen sunlight in 5,000 years, uncovering pottery and tools and human remains, reconstructing lives lived and lost in the Green Sahara, writing the history that the advancing desert buried and time nearly erased. Or perhaps you'll dream of what still lies waiting: the undiscovered settlements beneath hundreds of feet of sand, the monuments that satellites have glimpsed but humans haven't reached, the cities, if they exist, that might rewrite history if they're ever found, the answers to questions we've been asking about human origins and civilization development and climate change impacts, all waiting patiently beneath the world's largest desert, protected by the very harshness that makes discovery so difficult. And perhaps as you dream, you'll understand that the Sahara is not empty. It's full of history and mystery and possibility, full of stories waiting to be told, full of evidence waiting to be uncovered, full of connections to our past that we've lost and need to recover. The desert is a vault, a time capsule, an archive, preserving what the Green Sahara's inhabitants left behind when environmental catastrophe forced them to flee or die. And perhaps you'll wake tomorrow with a new appreciation for deserts, not as eternal wastelands, but as transformed landscapes that might hide entire chapters of human history, that might contain secrets comparable to anything found in jungles or underwater or beneath cities, secrets that we're only beginning to uncover, secrets that could change how we understand who we are and where we came from, and what we're capable of achieving and losing. The Sahara keeps its secrets well, the sand is patient, the heat and aridity preserve what they cover, the vastness and harshness prevent easy discovery, but slowly, with satellites and dedication and willingness to work in harsh conditions and cooperation with indigenous peoples who know the desert best, we're beginning to read the Sahara's archive, to decode the messages left by the Green Sahara's inhabitants, to understand that beneath the emptiness lies a history as rich and complex as anywhere on Earth. Sleep well, wondering about what waits beneath the sand. Sleep well, imagining rivers that dried up thousands of years ago and lakes that held more water than modern seas. Sleep well, contemplating civilizations that might have flourished when the Sahara was green and then vanished when the desert advanced, leaving only traces for us to find if we look carefully enough. Tomorrow, the search continues. Archaeologists will examine satellite imagery, plan expeditions, seek funding, negotiate access with governments in unstable regions, train with indigenous guides, and slowly, bit by bit, uncover the Sahara's secrets. The work will take decades. Many will dedicate careers to it. Some will make discoveries that change our understanding of history. Others will toil in obscurity, documenting small sites that contribute single pieces to the vast puzzle. But the effort is worthwhile, because beneath the sand lies not just archaeological data but human stories. Stories of people who lived and loved and built and struggled and adapted and eventually evacuated or perished when their world transformed. Stories that connect to our stories because some of those Green Sahara inhabitants were our ancestors, and their experiences shaped the civilizations they founded or joined when they fled the advancing desert. The Sahara is not peripheral to human history. It's central. It's where some of the first Africans developed complex societies. It's where agricultural experiments might have occurred as early as anywhere. It's where climate change destroyed civilizations and forced migrations that reshaped an entire continent. It's where evidence waits that could answer fundamental questions about humanity's past. And it's where we need to look systematically and thoroughly before time and development and climate change destroy what remains. Good night, dreamer of buried cities. Good night, wanderer of desert landscapes that were once green. Good night, seeker of answers to questions about where we came from and what we've achieved and lost across vast stretches of time. The desert keeps its secrets, but not forever. Patient work and modern technology are revealing what the sand has hidden. And in the coming decades, we might learn that the Sahara, far from being an eternal wasteland, was once home to sophisticated cultures, possibly early civilizations, definitely important populations whose descendants built some of history's greatest achievements. The Green Sahara lives on, not in the landscape, which is now hostile and empty, but beneath the surface, preserved in rock art and buried structures and ancient lake beds, and the memories encoded in DNA and mythology and cultural practices of the peoples whose ancestors fled when the desert came. Sleep and dream of discovery. Dream of what waits to be found. Dream of the day when Comprehensive Saharan Survey finally reveals the full extent of what lies beneath the sand. Dream of history rewritten, mysteries solved, connections made between ancient peoples and modern populations, between environmental change and cultural transformation, between the Green Sahara and the civilizations its refugees built elsewhere. The Sahara waits, the secrets remain, and tomorrow the search continues. One satellite image, one excavation, one discovery at a time, slowly building our understanding of Earth's largest desert and the civilizations it might be hiding. Rest well. The desert is patient, and so must we be, knowing that great discoveries require great effort, that the Sahara won't yield its secrets easily, but that those secrets once found will be worth the decades of work required to uncover them. Good night, beneath stars that shine over the Sahara just as they shone over the Green Sahara 8,000 years ago, witnessed by people whose names we don't know, but whose achievements we're slowly recovering, whose struggles we're beginning to understand, whose legacy we're uncovering grain by grain, site by site, discovery by discovery. The past is not past, it's buried, waiting, and we're learning to read it. Sweet dreams of green valleys in the desert, of rivers flowing through sand, of cities beneath dunes, of history waiting to be found. Good night.